The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold as the mist rolled away from the forest. In a valley where the land stretched wide and wild, surrounded by mountains that guarded it like silent sentinels, there lived a small tribe known as the Enoki. They were people of the earth, bound to the land, to the seasons, and to one another. Life was hard for the tribe. The rains had failed the previous season, and the harvest was meager. Hunting had grown more dangerous as wild predators crept closer to the village, drawn by the same hunger that gnawed at the stomachs of the Enoki. Each day, mothers fretted about their children, and fathers wondered if they could bring enough food to keep their families alive. Amid this hardship, there was one girl who seemed to carry a light even in the darkest days. Her name was Amira. She was no more than 9 years old, with wide, curious eyes and a spirit so gentle that even the fiercest elders softened when she approached. She had lost her mother when she was very small, and her father, one of the tribe's hunters, did what he could to care for her. But everyone knew Amira often went to bed hungry. She had no siblings to share the burden, and her father sometimes returned from the forest with nothing but scratches and tired eyes. And yet, despite her empty stomach, Amira always carried a smile. On one particular morning, when the smoke of dying cooking fires hung heavy in the air and the sound of crying babies echoed in the huts, Amira wandered out with a small piece of bread clutched tightly in her hand. It was all she had, half a piece of coarse, hard bread given to her the night before. To anyone else, it was nothing. But to her, it was everything. Her father had insisted she eat it at once, but she had saved half, whispering to herself that maybe someone else might need it more. As she stepped out of her hut, she saw an old woman sitting by the entrance of the village, hunched over and trembling. The woman had been sick for weeks, and her frail hands shook as she clutched her thin blanket. Amira paused, her eyes falling on the bread in her hand. Her stomach growled, but her heart was louder. Slowly, she walked toward the woman, knelt by her side, and whispered, "You can have my bread." The old woman looked at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "Child, no," she rasped, "you need it more than I." But Amira shook her head, smiling softly. "I'll be fine. But you need it." She placed the bread in the woman's trembling hands and stood up, brushing her dress, before turning away. What Amira didn't realize was that others had seen. A group of men who were returning from the forest stopped in their tracks, stunned by what they had witnessed. The elders, too, had noticed from the steps of the gathering hall. In a time when even adults fought over scraps, a small girl had chosen to give away the only food she had. That single act rippled through the air like a spark in dry grass. The tribe fell silent. That evening, the elders called a meeting. Voices rose in the hall, arguing over what they had seen. Some said the girl was foolish. What good was giving away one's only food when she herself could perish? Others said it was a sign, a reminder that even in times of scarcity, generosity could still exist. And yet, the discussion soon turned to shame. For how had it come to this, that a little girl had more kindness in her heart than the entire tribe put together? Many bowed their heads in silence, unable to meet one another's eyes. Amira's father sat quietly in the corner, tears welling in his eyes, proud yet afraid. He knew his daughter's heart, but he feared the tribe would see her as reckless or naive. He did not expect what came next. The next morning, the old woman who had received the bread stood in the center of the village, supported by 2 younger women. She was weak, but her voice was steady as she called the people together. "This child gave me her bread," she said, pointing at Amira, who stood nervously near her father. "When I thought I would starve, she fed me. And yet, she had nothing more to eat. Look at us, grown men and women who argue and hoard, while a little girl shows us what it means to be human. Have we forgotten who we are? Have we forgotten that the tribe survives together or not at all?" The crowd murmured, shifting uneasily. The hunters clenched their jaws. The mothers pulled their children closer. The elders sat in silence, their faces unreadable. Finally, the oldest elder rose to speak. His voice was deep and carried through the gathering like thunder. "This child has shamed us all. Her heart is greater than ours. From this day, let her act remind us that selfishness will be our death, but generosity will be our life." He looked around at the people, his eyes fierce. "The Enoki do not survive because of strength alone. We survive because we share." The words echoed in the ears of the tribe. That evening, something extraordinary happened. One by one, families began bringing out small bits of food, some berries, a strip of dried meat, a handful of nuts, and placed them in the center of the village. They were meager offerings, but together they became enough to feed the weakest among them. It was the first time in many weeks that the tribe had sat together to share a meal. And it had all begun with a little girl giving away half a piece of bread. Amira sat silently beside her father, bewildered as she watched people laugh, talk, and pass food around. The elders kept glancing at her, and the old woman held her hand tightly as if it were the most precious gift in the world. That night, as the stars spread across the sky, Amira lay awake in her hut, thinking. She had not expected any of this. She had only wanted to help someone who looked hungrier than she was. But her small act had become a flame that warmed the whole tribe. She did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning. For in the days to come, the Enoki would be tested in ways that none of them could have foreseen. And once again, the little girl who gave away her bread would stand at the center of it all. The days that followed the little girl's act of kindness seemed brighter at first. The Enoki tribe began sharing again, small meals taken together beneath the open sky, laughter slowly returning to lips that had been silent for too long. Children played without the same gnawing hunger, and for a brief moment, it seemed the tribe had remembered who they were. Yet the world beyond their valley had not changed. The rains still did not come. The rivers grew thinner, their banks cracking in the heat. Wild animals, starving and desperate, wandered closer to the village each night. Food grew scarcer, and fear grew louder. By the third week, the people began to whisper again, fearful, bitter whispers that cracked the fragile unity they had begun to rebuild. One evening, a group of hunters returned with nothing but exhaustion carved into their faces. They had been gone for 3 days and brought back no meat. Around the fire, the elders debated what to do. Some suggested moving the tribe deeper into the mountains to find game. Others argued that to leave the valley was to abandon the land of their ancestors. Voices rose, tempers flared, and beneath the noise, the children listened with wide, frightened eyes. Amira sat quietly at the edge of the firelight, her small hands clasped tightly together. She remembered how just weeks ago, people had placed their scraps in the center of the village, inspired by her bread. But now, as hunger bit deeper, she saw those same hands clutching at what little food they had left. She could feel the fear thick in the air, pressing against her like a heavy weight. That night, she prayed silently to the stars, asking that her people not forget the lesson they had learned. The very next day, something unexpected happened. At dawn, scouts spotted smoke rising from the far end of the valley. By midday, strangers appeared at the edge of the tribe's land, tall men, weary women, and tired children, their clothes torn, their faces gaunt. They were another tribe, displaced from their own lands by drought and driven here in search of shelter and food. They came not as raiders but as beggars, their hands raised in peace, their eyes hollow with hunger. The sight sent ripples of panic through the Enoki. The tribe was already struggling to feed itself. To share with strangers seemed impossible. Around the fire that night, the arguments grew louder than ever. Some shouted that they must drive the strangers away, lest they consume what little food remained. Others reminded them of their ancestors' laws, that to turn away the starving was to invite a curse upon one's own people. Amira sat in the shadows, watching the faces of the men and women she had grown up around. She saw fear, suspicion, and anger. But she also saw something else, a flicker of shame. Quietly, she rose to her feet, her small voice trembling as she spoke. "When I gave my bread to the old woman," she said, "I had nothing left. But I was still alive the next day. And when you saw it, you remembered how to share. If we send these people away, who will we be? If a child can give, why can't we?" Her words fell into the fire-lit silence like stones in water. For a moment, no one moved. Her father's eyes shone with pride and fear, knowing the weight of her words. The strangers waited at the edge of the village, not daring to hope. Finally, the oldest elder, the same man who had spoken weeks before, stood. His voice cracked with age, but carried with authority. "This girl is right. If we forget how to share, we will lose ourselves before we lose our lives. Bring the strangers in." The decision shocked many, and whispers spread like wind through the camp. But the strangers were welcomed, given space in empty huts, and fed with the little food that could be gathered. That night, there was no feast, only small portions divided further than ever before. Yet as the fire burned, something remarkable happened. The strangers, though weak, offered what little they had carried: dried roots, herbs, and a handful of wild seeds. One of them, an older man, explained that in his tribe they had learned to grind these roots into flour and mix them with wild grass to make a bread that, though coarse, could fill many stomachs. Hope flickered once more. The Enoki began to learn from the newcomers, gathering plants they had ignored before, mixing them with seeds, grinding them with stone. The bread was rough and bitter, but it was food, and it was enough to keep them alive. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, the two tribes began to live as one. At first, suspicion lingered, but the act of working together, hunting, gathering, sharing, knit their lives tighter. Amira often ran between the camps, playing with children who had once been strangers. She listened to their stories, learned their songs, and taught them her own. In her innocence, she treated them not as outsiders but as family. And slowly, the adults began to follow her example. But the real test was yet to come. One night, as the wind howled and the fire struggled against the cold, danger came in the form of raiders. A band of desperate men, seeing the smoke of the camp, descended with weapons in hand, hoping to steal what little food the two tribes had gathered. They came swiftly, shouting, their faces twisted by hunger and greed. The Enoki and their new allies scrambled in panic. The men grabbed their spears, the women gathered the children. For a moment, it seemed chaos would tear them apart. But then, in the midst of the confusion, Amira stepped forward. She held in her small hands a basket of the coarse bread that the tribes had learned to make together. With trembling steps, she walked toward the raiders, who stopped in disbelief at the sight of a child standing before them. "You can have my bread," she said again, her voice soft but steady. "Take it. Just don't hurt anyone." The raiders stared. Some laughed cruelly. Others hesitated, glancing at one another with unease. In that moment, something shifted. The leader, a gaunt man with hollow eyes, stepped forward and looked at the little girl. He saw the basket, the trembling hands, the courage in her gaze. He reached out, took a piece of bread, and bit into it. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackling fire. Finally, the leader turned to his men and said, "They have nothing worth stealing. But this child, she has given us more than we came for." With that, he ordered his men to leave. And just like that, the danger passed. The tribes were stunned. They gathered around Amira, tears in their eyes, awe in their hearts. What weapons and anger could not do, the simple gift of bread had accomplished. Once again, her act of giving had saved them all. From that day forward, Amira was no longer seen as just a child. She was a symbol, a reminder that generosity could disarm fear, that kindness could unite enemies, that even the smallest hands could carry the greatest power. The elders declared that her story would be told for generations, so that no one would forget how a little girl, with half a piece of bread, had changed the fate of two tribes. And so, the Enoki and their new kin survived the famine. They planted the seeds that the strangers had brought, learned new ways to find food, and grew stronger together. The valley, once a place of fear and hunger, became a place of unity and hope. And at the center of it all was Amira, the girl who gave her bread. And dear viewers, just like Amira's simple act of kindness changed everything for her people, our small actions too can change lives. A smile, a helping hand, or a kind word might be the very thing someone else needs today. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Together, let's keep spreading hope and kindness.